Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's been a hot minute since I've posted any book content on here, but I've just been busy, I've started my MA, I'm doing all sorts of exciting things, learning about the publishing industry. That all being said, last year I set myself the challenge of reading 12 books on Goodreads, and I did in fact complete it. My goal this year is now 24 and I completed 12 books. There were a few that I did pick up, but I just didn't finish because I just wasn't feeling it, and I kind of figured out that I'm much more of a mood reader, which is fun but also incredibly frustrating when I'm in a reading mood but don't know what kind of book I want to read. I'm going to share with you my thoughts on all the 12 books I read this year.
She was like a shot of espresso. She's like being bathed in sunlight. She's incredibly energetic and enthusiastic, and she had this sense of play and fun, which was incredibly exciting.
I started my book reading journey literally last year, and I started it off with non-fiction. I started off with this, Vex King's Good Vibes, Good Life, and this was the first book I read of the year, and it was a good little read for kind of the start of a new year. However, I felt like the tone got very arrogant. Unless you live your life the exact same way as me, you're basically gonna flop at life, and we don't want that. We don't want that negative energy. And I feel like a lot of non-fiction books, especially books that are lifestyle books, they kind of miss the mark a lot of the time because they just yell at you, and the tone of it tends to be very overwhelming, kind of off-putting. And this, I'm not gonna lie, put me into a reading slump, and I did just like skim read the last quarter of it. There were some nice quotes and I really liked learning about his life and how he applied what he learned, but then towards the end it just got very yelly and I didn't like the tone of it. It's a 1. It's barely a 1. If anything, I enjoyed liking the story, but I didn't like the tone, I didn't like the message, and it kind of put me off non-fic books for a while. Not a great start to the year, but luckily it did kind of get better, and it did in the second month when I read this, A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. You might know his other book, The Kite Runner. I swear this book, I bawled my eyes out. I sped through like the last kind of quarter of it, third of it, because it is just so heartbreaking of a story. It's basically about these two women, I can't remember the names, there's two female characters and you get both their perspectives. It's written in the third person, but we get these two stories of these two women growing up in a time when the Taliban takes over and what it's like to be a woman in their country. And the stories are just, they're two different stories, and there's just one that just, it just rips your hearts to pieces. And when they do kind of get together as well, that is a really good and interesting cross point as well. You just learn so much about war and how the impact it has on women, and the question of morality of it all. It is a really brilliant book. This is definitely a 5 out of 5 read. I would highly recommend it to everyone. Like, I just feel like everyone needs to read it at some point in their life. I luckily got this as a second hand from World of Books for literally like £4, and it's a hardback. So yeah, if you want to give it a read, give it a read. I highly recommend also getting your book second hand if you can. I feel like there's something gratifying about it. Going off of that 5 star, I went from a 1 star to a 5 star. Great. And then in January, then in March, sorry, I don't know my months. Then in March, I read, we're going to ignore the tabs for now, The Notebook. And why I read The Notebook, I loved the film, and I heard Nicholas Sparks was a good little writer, but I just think his characters are so one-dimensional and their relationship is so, there is no space for you to become invested in the relationship and root for them. The dialogue isn't great. I honestly prefer the film over the book. It just wasn't great. Why I tabbed it, honestly, it did have a few cute little quotes and stuff, but it wasn't writing that I would necessarily like. It isn't a story I would go back and read again. It's a solid 2.5 for me. TikTok caught me. TikTok, book talk, yeah, it had me by the neck and it said, we're not letting go now. So I, being a beginner reader, obviously I was looking for recommendations on what to read, and I fell down the Colleen Hoover hole. And as we get into it, you will see I did read a few Colleen Hoover books last year, and I don't love her writing, but I did read It Ends With Us, and I will say It Ends With Us was better than the other books I read, because it didn't have incest and it didn't have, I don't know, all sorts of weird things she has in her books. Book top reviews I was seeing, everyone was thirsting over Ryle. Ryle was a literal psychopath. Why you would want to like him is insane. And a lot of people saying, oh, we didn't expect that from Ryle, but the signs were there from the beginning. He literally, when she met him, he was kicking something or doing something aggressive on the roof, and I was just like, that's such a weird like thing to be attracted to. I mean, I could understand it because Lily grew up in an environment where she was kind of desensitized to things like that, and I did like the arc of her growing to have some empathy for her mother. Hoover's writing isn't for me. Someone's calling me. My mother called me. I bought the wrong coconut milk. Anyways, as I was saying, I will give credit where credit is due in the sense of Colleen Hoover is very good at pacing her stories. I did find that kind of across all her books. She has a good kind of pace to them, which makes them quite fast to read. It is kind of hard to get through with her writing style for me. I'm concerned that it's YA because this is literally a book about domestic abuse. The year went on and I read a few more of her books that I will touch on. I just wasn't a big fan of her writing, but I will give It Ends With Us a solid 3. Also, I saw that she made a colouring book for It Ends With Us, which I was extremely confused by, considering this book is about domestic abuse. So I don't know why her or her publishers thought a colouring book for a book on domestic abuse would be a good idea. On to a much brighter note, I found an author that I completely fell in love with within this new reading habit of mine, and I want to thank TikTok for hyping her up. I know TikTok gave me Hoover, but they also gave me Miss Taylor Jenkins Reid, and this is One True Loves. Now I know, and I did read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and we'll get onto that later, but I wanted to read a book that wasn't that popular on TikTok by her first, just to get a general sense of her style and her writing and see if I actually genuinely wanted to read the one that got a lot of hype. Because I found with reading It Ends With Us, I had my expectations set so high by book talk that when I read it I was a bit underwhelmed and kind of disappointed by what I was reading, and I loved it. It's about this girl who, she's basically in like a whole new relationship now, but she was married I think a year or a couple years ago, but then he like died, her husband died in like a plane crash or something, and then all of a sudden he comes back alive, and then she kind of has to figure out like, does she choose a past love like her husband, or does she choose the future love that she has now? Taylor Jenkins Reid has a really great way of being around with the dynamics. You could really tell there was a chemistry there. It was kind of giving Jess and Logan. Do you know what I mean? If you watch Gilmore Girls, it was kind of like Jess versus Logan kind of vibes. Really enjoyed it, and I think the ending was so satisfying. I would definitely say it is a solid 4. Yeah, it's a 4 because her other books are just, actually yeah, it's a 4. Love her writing style. She paces it really well. This was a great introduction to Taylor Jenkins Reid. If you haven't read her books before and you're a little bit scared to read, you know, her overhyped books, like The Seven Husbands, I would say it's hyped for a reason, but if you don't want to start there, start with this, One True Loves. I don't know why I sang that. Yeah. And then, okay, so basically after One True Loves, we went on a bit of a great kind of roll with my reads, and there was one TikTok that I saw, and she was literally like crying her eyes out, and I was like, what's going on? Told me it's this book, and it was self-published. It's now been published, I think, by Tor. Was it published by Tor? I know it was published by someone. I read Alone With You in the Other. I do have a reading vlog of this on my channel, and it got a lot of hype. I swear, I just love this book so much. It's my entire personality. I might actually reread it after I finish reading Pride and Prejudice. So I'm trying to go through the classics this year, because I haven't read any classics yet. But yeah, when people say it breaks you, it really does break you. I love the main characters. They are so complex. Rawness to them that is so humane that you can't help but empathize as a human yourself. I know that's a lot of words, but yeah. This is a beautiful story about love, and there's some great quotes in here. The way their romance develops is such a great slow burn, and it picks up pace, and it's so realistic in the way it represents relationships. As much as there are the highs, there are the lows, and the way it approached is so beautifully done. I didn't cry the way the girl cried in the TikTok, but I did have moments where I was just like, when you have a lump in your throat and you're like, this is a lot of emotion right now. Yeah, so I would highly recommend, if you see a copy in the stores, get it, because the cover, the hardback version, is beautiful. It's got that beautiful spray on the spray, you know, the colours on the side. But yeah, this is the OG copy that I have, her self-published version. But yeah, this was definitely a 5-star, and it got me into my love for fiction, like contemporary fiction, contemporary fiction romance. So then following that, I then read Normal People. I'm currently watching the TV show version. I know I'm late to it, but I read Normal People. You can see I've tabbed it. Oh my goodness, as well. These two couples, they need to learn to communicate, because it was frustrating to read for both of them. But again, Rooney, brilliant. A little fact, at my university, we have the CEO of Faber Faber come in and do a few lectures, and then after he kind of did all his lectures, we went for like drinks with him, like the class went for drinks with him, and he publishes Rooney, and we talked about Rooney and just how much like we loved her, and I told him like just how much Rooney's writing has just influenced the way I write, and the way this and Blake's books have really opened my eyes as a writer myself, in writing realistic human relationships and dynamics and the way they work. So Normal People, again, it's just those two books, and the next book after this and the last book are books that I will sit and think about constantly, and just think, my goodness, that is probably some of the best bit of writing I've read. I know this book is very, very Marmite. I will say, unless you've gone through what Marianne and Connor have gone through emotionally, you know, this whole, what are we, you know, being in a relationship without the label, all that kind of stuff, unless you have actually genuinely gone through this, I don't think you're going to relate as much as other people per se might. And you might not, you know, necessarily enjoy it, and that's totally fine. And I know also people found it quite hard because she doesn't use speech marks, which I got a bit confused at first, but once you get into it, genuinely, it fits the purpose. It is a conversation without having a conversation, if that makes sense, between the two, and it makes it flow really, really well. So yeah, absolutely love this. This was another 5-star read for me. Actually, wait, not to be is it 5 stars? Okay, Alone with You and the Other was 5 stars. I would say this is like a 4.9. Purely because in comparison to Alone with You and the Other and The Seven Husbands, and I just gave away what the next book is, and the last book, it's still a very, very good book. But I would kind of put it in 3rd place or 4th place under these. But the next book I read was, as I said, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I swear, I sit in bed at night and I think about this book in my sleep, because I'm just like, how on earth is Evelyn Hugo, sorry, this is a major spoiler alert, so cover your ears if you haven't read it yet but you plan on reading it. Evelyn Hugo isn't real. She's not a real person. And I don't know how Taylor Jenkins Reid fleshed out her character and the narrator's character so flipping well. The way it is, their stories kind of intersect as well, I was like, damn. But like, you know, you had a feeling it was coming. Like, there's gotta be a reason why she chose her. Her life is just so interesting, and it's one of those books that I sit and I think about, and I look at a lot of celebrities today. I think a lot of celebrities should honestly read this and they'll have a very meta moment with this book. But when I sit and think about this book, I'm like, oh my goodness, and think about certain celebrities, I'm like, goodness gracious me. This is basically their life story, and this is like their future written for them. Like, this is giving big Taylor Swift energy, big Marilyn Monroe energy, genuinely just really good writing. I think everyone should read it. I think it's a book that anyone and everyone can enjoy. This is definitely a 5 star. This was one of my favourite books of the year that I read, along with Alone with You and the Other, Normal People, and the last book. This book I read was another Hoover book. I read 2 Hoover books in a row, actually. First one was this one, Ugly Love. Hoover kind of, I understand that there are only certain amounts of plots and ways you can write characters and have their life go, but all of them being the same from the same author gets very, very repetitive. And after the book I read after this, I was like, I'm just not feeling any more Hoover books, because I've come to the conclusion now that they are all a copy and paste of the same story with the same white heterosexual characters. And I just don't like the way women are written either. Angela Dust does a much better job. Still don't like the way she writes women. It wasn't bad, it wasn't great. I thought the whole incest thing was bizarre. It wasn't technically incest because they were step siblings, but it's still weird. Miles needs to get a therapist because clearly he has some issues. But what I did appreciate when I got to the book after was she does have her own little universe. I couldn't stomach the other relationship with his step sibling, and I didn't like him for Tate either. I think Tate could have done so much better, and she forgave him way, way, way too quickly. Okay, Miles wasn't that problematic in the way Riles was, and it ended thus, but still Miles had major issues and he needed to build a bridge and get over it by going and seeing a therapist at least 5 times a week, because he had some serious damage, and I do feel like his trauma was displaced onto Tate, and he didn't take responsibility or accountability when he did hurt her feelings, and she voiced it and she wanted him to stay away, and you know, like, that's not hot, you know, respect boundaries, respect space. It is concerning that these are the books that YA audiences are consuming, because there's just none of the men in her books understand boundaries, which is just not what I want. And then I read November 9, and that is when I came to the conclusion that, oh, by the way, Ugly Love, I would give it a 3, 2.5. Ends with Us is better, but 0.5. Then I read, November 9th, and that's when I came to the conclusion that all her books are the same. All her books have the same tone, the state, like characters. It was so hard for me to get through this, I'll be so real. I understand, like, yes, her pacing is good, but it was so repetitive. You know, the characters and the way they act and the way they behave and the way they think and describe their partners. It got boring. To be quite frank, it got boring. I would give this a 2.5. It wasn't bad, but it just wasn't great. I read a dystopian YA, so very different to all the books that I read in the year. What shattered me, the reason I picked it up was because of Steph Bower. For some reason I thought she'd read the Shatter Me series, but turns out she hasn't. I picked it up in the works and it was okay. It got better towards the end. I would read this book on my way to uni on the train, and I just, like, the writing style just kind of gave me a headache, because I can understand why it was written the way it was written, but she has a disclaimer in the front explaining the lines in the book. I don't know, it just the writing style wasn't my favorite, but I did enjoy the plot. I will say that I enjoyed the concept of, it's like this power where she kills people if she touches them, which was interesting. There's a part of me that was like, after I read it, I was like, I've read it, do I want to read the rest of the series, because there's quite a few of them. After we got to that end, I kind of want to now, because I'm kind of invested in her relationship, not with the guy that she's actually with, so I'm interested to see how it develops as a plot. And to be honest, I have been looking to get back into dystopian novels. They were like, I ate that up as a kid. We'll see if this year I, you know, continue with the series. Bad. I would give it a very average 3. I feel like I'm being generous with that because I didn't love the writing style, but yeah, the plot was good, so a 3. This book isn't number 1, it's definitely number 2. I already started to tab it, but I'm rereading it in bits because there are so many beautiful moments and lines, and I will describe this. Honestly, this book is what I would say is like a work of art. It's very short, but it is so beautifully written, and for a debut novel, insane. And it's Open Water by Caleb Azima Nelson. I've already, like, I gifted this in our little class book exchange, and actually one of my friends picked it, thank goodness. Every person that I speak to, I recommend it to them because it's short, it's beautifully written, the characters are so, oh goodness, it's written from the second person perspective, which is very, very hard, by the way, to write in. But you just feel everything so intensely with this book, and I sit and I think about it and I'm like, I wish I could write something this well and in the second person. A very real representation of masculinity, culture, relationships. Again, I would say that 3 books all kind of fall within the same realm of contemporary romances, but with realism. There's such a rawness in this book that it's gut-wrenching in places. Genuinely, like, it feels like someone's twisting me with a knife because it's just such a painful experience, in a good way. And I think it's a book that everyone needs to read to learn more about the Black British experience as well. You can really feel the rawness of emotion, not just from the characters but from Nelson himself. Of course, at the end of the day, writers write from experience. We just fictionalize them. At Open Water, and I will honestly say it is one of those books that I will forever recommend to people because it is beautiful. And this was, if I could give it a 6 out of 5, I would, you know what, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 5. It was that good. Those are all the books I read for 2022. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you got a few little recommendations. A lovely chatting with you guys. Thank you for coming back to my channel. I hope you enjoyed and have a lovely day or evening wherever you are. Bye.